So before we get going with the actual presentation, I have a 2-minute special presentation that is on a completely different topic. Think of it like the short film before the Disney film actually starts. This is a question that I have for you. I don't really have an answer. I guess that's why it's only 2 minutes. I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking that we're sort of the picks and axes generation, right? When it comes to technology, which is sort of fundamentally reshaping the world and everything that we do and how everything works. And yet, I still feel like there's this sort of weird myopia, even in our industry, about what's going to happen next. Like, it seems like, sort of like Stowe Boyd as an exception, perhaps. Like, for the most part, even when we're thinking about what the future is, we're always sort of searching for what the next nearest change will be, especially in this industry where we're sort of constantly chasing the present, I think, instead of constantly chasing the future. So I've been thinking a lot lately about, like, what's the weirdest shit that technology could do to the world, right? The way that we have this sort of instantaneous communication, the different way that we connect up to each other. Like, how do you, and this is my question to all of you, because if you've got one bigger than the one that I'm about to give you, I kind of want to hear it. So I've been trying to think about, like, what is the largest, like, biggest, like, strangest ramification of technology? And here's what I've got. Here's what I've come up with. So for most of human history, as we started to organize ourselves into sort of systems for, I don't know, advancing the population, increasing capital advance, all that sort of stuff, we sort of come up with this model, right? The nation state, right? That's sort of the biggest way that we have, and they're all geographically bound. And I think it's really cool because we've always done it that way because that was the easiest way to organize that kind of human behavior or sort of that sort of human activity. But we have this other thing now, technology, which allows us to form actually surprisingly similar bonds. And so I guess the question I have is, like, that sort of represents that is what happens when Facebook invades Germany, right? Like, how do you think big? How do you think weird? Like, is that something that could happen? Nothing. I'm getting nothing. I think it's kind of weird. What if Facebook invaded Germany? Anyway, if you've got something you think would be bigger or weirder or stranger that technology could do to the world, I would love to hear about it. On with the actual presentation. Since it is 1:30 and we're close to the end of the day, and if you decide you want to do that thing that I would probably do if I was in your position, which is wander outside and enjoy the sunshine, this slide is my TLDR version of the presentation. It's this. I want to talk to you about luck today, how luck works, what sorts of behaviors create luck. And in case you want the short version of that, this is it. Good luck is hard work. But what I'd like to get into today a little bit is what it means, what kind of work that is, how we can do it, how we can optimize it, and I think most importantly, how can we structure the organizations that we build and work for to encourage the kind of behaviors that create luck. Luck is, at the end of the day, just your ability to see and interact with the unexpected. Here we go. This man you may recognize. His goggles are goofy. Sergey Brin, founder of Google, was asked on stage by John Battelle in 2005, I think. So not long after they'd gone public, right? So think back. Web 2.0 has just barely begun to start. Most of the world still thinks that the internet is some sort of technological backwater that didn't really work, right? Hard to believe these days, but back then that's what people thought. He's at the Web 2.0 conference. It's the first one, and like, Google's just gone public and is basically like the shining example of what technology might be, right? What this industry, the thing that we're all actively participating or trying to participate in right now, can become. And so, obviously, everybody wants to know his secret. So Battelle asks Brin, while he's sitting up on stage, first question when he gets out is, what do you attribute Google's fantastic, stunning success to? And Brin says, the #1 factor that contributed to our success was luck, which I think is a pleasant and humbling answer. And it turns out that, like, anytime you talk to somebody that's managed to succeed with that level of speed and scale, and they get asked the same question, they say pretty much the same thing. As much as entrepreneurs want to take credit for each and every little decision and say it made complete sense at the time, I promise you a lot of it is luck, says the was billion-dollar, now I think about $730 million man. So, what does that mean? Here's what I don't think it means. I don't think that what Brin or Systrom or any of these people who are saying this, because we'll go through a bunch more during this presentation, I don't think that what they're doing is abdicating agency. I don't think that they are saying that they don't consider themselves responsible for what happened to them. I think what they are saying, and I think what is true for any of us that want to figure out how to succeed in the same way that they did, is that to succeed with the speed and scale of something like a Google or an Instagram requires more than any one individual or any team of individuals could ever possibly hope to do on their own. And so when they talk about luck, it's simply shorthand for acknowledging that their success required the participation of a huge number of variables and a huge number of individuals that they could not have known and could not have predicted in advance. It's that simple, and that's what I want to talk about today. So we talk about it as serendipity, and by we I mean me and my co-founder and co-author Thor of the book from which all of this is generated. We call it serendipity because we want to distinguish it from luck, like blind luck, right? Blind luck is there's the good kind and the bad kind. You get hit by lightning, you win the lottery. It's not actually something you can predict. It's not actually something that you have much agency in. Serendipity, on the other hand, is a particular kind of luck that you can affect through your choices and your actions. So the serendipity is a word that gets used in a lot of different ways. I'm in Northern California. A lot of those ways are kind of hippie. I'd like to take the word back, maybe, in the way that you can do. Serendipity, the best definition we found from a guy named Peck van Andel says, serendipity is the art of the unsought finding. Another way to say that's maybe a little more straightforward is serendipity is looking for one thing and finding something else. And then let's dig into what that means. We went all like engineering on it, even though I'm not an engineer, and decided we would turn it into an equation, see if that would make it more palatable to the tech industry. This is our equation for serendipity. Serendipity is what happens when you add chance and creativity together. Chance being everything you don't know, everything you can't predict, everything that is outside of you, everything, dare I say it, that is part of the network. And then creativity, which strictly defined, creativity is your ability to create something that is new and valuable in the world. That is the strict definition of creativity in a Webster's dictionary kind of way. By the way, stop me if you've got questions at any point. I'm going kind of fast because that 2-minute intro cut my time down to 16 minutes. So we refer to this as planned serendipity, the set of skills, the set of behaviors that you can engage in that create a context or an environment in which unexpectedly good things that you might need or want in order to succeed in the directions that you want to succeed, can happen to you, and so that you can see and notice them. That is what planned serendipity is. It's kind of fun because it sounds like a little bit of a contradiction in terms, and maybe it is. We can't actually plan serendipity, but we can plan to create the environment, the context, the set of opportunities, even if we do not know exactly what they are. And we can do this, and I think this is important, at both an individual and an organizational level. If organizations can be designed to incent, as all of the organizations that we work for or create can and have been designed to do, intentionally or not, to create or incent a certain set of behaviors, then this is a set of behaviors that I think is really important going into a world where everything is moving really quickly, right? And change happens faster and faster, and somebody in this room will probably invent the next communication revolution. We used to get those once every 1,000 years. Now we get them like once every 2 weeks, right? Change is happening faster and faster, and for our businesses, for our careers, for anything that we want to do, if we want it to succeed in the world, the only way that it's going to work is if we have figured out structures that allow us to actively, methodically engage with the unknown. And that's what planned serendipity is. Okay, so here is the thanks for sticking around to the halfway point slide about the 3 steps that are not rocket surgery about what it takes to get lucky. The first, if you want to have more chance in your life, you have to actively work to generate more chance opportunities. We'll go into more detail about all of these. The second, equally important, there's this Louis Pasteur quote, chance favors prepared minds, and that means a lot of things, but one of the things that we learned as we started to dig into luck and people who were lucky and sort of tried to reverse engineer these skills based on their behaviors, is that for a lot of people, luck is just being able to see or make connections between things that other people cannot, right? So a lot of luck is just being able to see things when other people don't. And then the third one, I guess they're all important. I was going to say this one's really important, but they're all important, is a willingness to take action on the ones that matter. At the end of the day, luck means that I was going to do this one thing, and then this other thing showed up, and I decided, you know what? That's better, right? So luck is, in this sense, serendipity is, in this sense, like fundamentally an act of bravery. So let's get into all of this. Start with the first one. In the book, we refer to what we call the 8 skills of serendipity. I'm only giving you 3 today by the book. So, first one is called, finally, a laugh. Guys, faster. All right. First one is called motion. Motion is just doing something. I mean, it's as simple as that, right? Motion is what happens when you get out in the world and you create some way, you move, you give yourself an opportunity to collide, essentially, with things or people or places or ideas or environments that are different from the ones that you normally encounter. It turns out as you start to dig into the study of serendipity that, routine is one of the biggest enemies of serendipity. If you do the same thing every day over and over and over, you are unlikely to encounter anything new. Famous American inventor whose name I've forgotten, so it probably can't be that famous. But I do remember that he invented air conditioning. He has this great line where he said, nobody ever stumbled over anything sitting down. Right? And so now think about the way that our organizations are built, right? They're basically built for routine. They're built for process and routinization and risk mitigation and control. And as our organizations get bigger and more hierarchical and people get more specialized, they are less and less likely to do things that are different. And this is one of the reasons that so many of the organizations we work with are, at the end of the day, unlucky. This thing you're at right now is a fantastic example of motion, right? So when I say motion, I mean it in the broadest sense. It just means getting out and doing something different. Ideally, it's new experiences in familiar contexts. Conferences are awash with serendipity. Almost all of you, one hopes, has had an experience like this here in the last couple of days, right? Because you are surrounded by people who have the same interests, the same idea, to some degree the same background as you do, and yet they have different backgrounds, they have different experiences, they have different ideas, they have different colleagues, right? And it is in the intersection, it is in those conversations, wherever they might happen, whether it's here while I'm talking or outside while I'm talking. Thank you. Now I've lost the thread. Whatever it is, like the point is that like it is different, it is new. And so the question I have for all of you, starting with motion, is how do we get more of that into our lives every day? How do we break out of routine? How do we make breaking out of our routine part of our routine? Chew on that one. Quick story of organizational serendipity actually comes from the world's greatest control freak, Steve Jobs. If you read his biography, you're probably familiar with the story of the building of Pixar. It's an amazing building. If you ever make it out to Emeryville and near where I live in the Bay Area, you should totally check it out. Get one of the people who work there to give you a tour. It's an unbelievable building. So Jobs knew that and believed that the best way to create serendipity in his environment, the best way to get those sort of unexpected interactions free from organizational hierarchy, free from divisional turf wars, was just to create an environment where people were more likely to collide with each other that normally wouldn't. So the way that he did that with the Pixar building is he built a building for serendipity. Every single shared service with the exception of the bathrooms. That means everything that you might need to get up and go to in the day, the mailroom, the lunch line, the cafeteria, the whatever, the copier. They still use copiers. The fax machine, I don't know, the mimeograph. Like, he put them all, oh, gotcha. So he put them all together in this giant, beautiful atrium smack in the center of this building, right? So anytime you need to do anything, you have to get up and walk into this, like, beautiful atrium that's totally designed to just make you hang out for a while and talk to somebody, standing in line for coffee, standing in line for the copier, running into somebody you haven't seen for a while. And what Jobs knew was that, if there were 1,000 interactions like that, 999 of them would just be about whatever, your kids, sports, whatever. But there would be that one interaction, that critical interaction that he couldn't predict, that would have value for the work of the organization. So that's fascinating to me, and that's an example of a building designed for motion. You talk to anybody who works at Pixar, and they will tell you it is unbelievably effective. And now, if you go and look at that crazy, awesome, beautiful, weird space alien Apple campus with that story in mind, that weird circular thing where to get anywhere from one point to another, you have to walk across a giant open field in the middle, you'll see that he was basically doing the same thing. The next one is preparation. Chance favors prepared minds. The thing about preparation is I don't think it means what most of us think it means. We think about preparation as everything we've learned, everything we've been taught, everything that we know. Truth is that most of the time, much like routine, what we know gets in the way of what we could know. So having a prepared mind is not so much about what we fill it with, it is about what we do to empty it out. My favorite story about preparation is from the art world. This is the large glass. It's sort of Marcel Duchamp's masterwork, first shown in the Brooklyn Museum in the early 1920-ish, I forget when. Also known as the Bride stripped bare by her bachelor's even. This piece it's stunning and amazing. It's sort of critical American art. So it's glass. There's 3 panes. They're huge. This doesn't give you a sense of scale. It's actually bigger than this. It's gigantic panes of glass, and he spent years and years. He knew it was going to be one of his last major pieces. Years and years working on this. On glass, giant pieces of glass that have to get shipped around from gallery to gallery. So it shows at the Brooklyn Museum, actually, just a little south of here for the first time. And after the first showing, they go to package it up, and I forget where they were sending it to, somewhere else in the States. Package it up really carefully because it's made of glass, put it in the back of a truck, ship it across the country, open it up, shattered to pieces. All 3 panes, shattered. Right? So this is his masterwork. And you know what Duchamp does? He laughs. He laughs in that moment because where the rest of us would see despair, he sees opportunity. He spends the next 2 years gluing it back together because he knows a number of things as an already successful artist, and one is that if he does that, it's going to make the piece better in the sense that I'm going to stand here and talk to you about it today. That's what it means to be prepared. That's what it means to forget what we already know. The guy who invented NutraSweet, a guy named James Schlatter, in the 80s for a pharmaceutical company called G.D. Searle, was not looking to invent an artificial sweetener. He was actually looking to invent anti-ulcer medication. He worked for a company that was a pharmacologist. They did drugs. They made drugs. One day, he's in his lab. He's trying to find anti-ulcer medication. He's trying to figure out like what's the right combination of whatever it is scientists do. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I just picture them in lab coats mixing chemicals in beakers. And one of the things, that's what I picture. And one of the like beaker. And one of the sets of chemical combinations that he mixes together actually boils over, bubbles over, does something that makes it go over the side of the glass. So he hurries to clean it up, and he's a messy scientist. He's not wearing gloves or anything. I guess that's weird. And he gets this stuff all over his hands, and then he doesn't even wash them. He just continues on with his experiments, right? There's an argument to be made here, by the way, for what I like to think of as controlled sloppiness, because it turns out that many of mankind's most significant and fundamental breakthroughs actually come from somebody who is just a little too messy to clean up after themselves. And Schlatter is no exception. So he gets this stuff all over his hands. A little later in the day, he's going to, he does that thing that some of us do, not me, because I think it's gross, but some of us do, like Schlatter, where you lick your finger before you go to turn the page of a book, right? And he goes to lick his finger, and he notices that it's just incredibly sweet. It is incredibly sweet. It is the sweetest taste he's ever had in his mouth, this chemical that boiled over, right? So, fast forward 5 years, and G.D. Searle has actually created a multi-billion-dollar industry, NutraSweet, and pretty much every artificial sweetener that happened afterwards came from this moment with James Schlatter. And that's lucky. That's serendipity. But what I want you to think about in terms of preparation for your organizations is about everything that had to happen both before and after that for Schlatter to succeed, right? He had to be in an environment, in an organization that said, hey, you were trying to do that one thing, right? You were looking for an anti-ulcer medication, but you found this other thing, and maybe it's worthwhile, and maybe we should chase it down. He had to believe that. If you work in an organization that only incents you to do stuff that has worked, right? Anybody who works in an organization with incentives is basically incented to do the thing that has worked. This is why so much of Western business is so fucked, because we pay people to do the things that we know have worked, and it pretty much guarantees that they're going to miss the things that might work next. It really pisses me off. So Schlatter didn't work at a company like that. G.D. Searle didn't work at a company wasn't a company like that. And I think a lot of our companies could stand to be a lot more like that. I'd also like to point out that on the other side of this, G.D. Searle had no experience with consumer packaged goods. None whatsoever. And yet they were still willing to become a consumer packaged goods company to take advantage of this opportunity. And then ask yourselves, am I building that kind of business? One that would be willing to make that kind of radical change that might be worth billions of dollars? I'm going to skip that slide and go on to divergence. Divergence is the last skill. Divergence is simply the ability and the willingness to do something different when it arises. I'm going to tell you a story of the unluckiest human being we found in all the time that we were researching luck, just to do things a little differently. This is from another story from my home state of California. This guy's name is James Marshall. James Marshall is famous, or perhaps infamous, for being the guy that was the first person to discover gold during the gold rush. It didn't work out for him quite the way you would think. So what happens is, rich man building he wants to build an agricultural empire, right? Northern California, fertile land. He recognizes the booming population that's going to happen over the next, 100 years. And he decides, okay, I'm going to farm. I'm going to supply all the land to these folks. So he's tilling the fields, or rather he has underpaid wage slaves tilling the fields for him. And one day, the foreman comes to him and says, Mr. Schlatter, Mr. Marshall, I think everyone in our book's named James, and sometimes I get them mixed up. Mr. Marshall, I think I've discovered gold. And he holds his hand out gold, and Marshall says, that is absolutely gold, and you need to hide that away and not tell anybody about it. I don't want anyone to see it. But not because he wanted to go find gold, because he was worried that if they found all that gold, that he wouldn't be able to build his agricultural empire. Long story short, happened anyway, and Marshall missed his chance to jump the gun on that one. Idiot. Except not really. I mean, the truth is we all like to think that we wouldn't miss out on an opportunity like that, but I think they're harder to see when they show up than maybe we recognize. On the other hand, you can look at a company like Amazon.com. I love Amazon as a company that has institutionalized serendipity. Like, think about all the things that Amazon has tried in its lifetime, all of the ways it has diverged, all of the things that it have tried that were different, right? It started with books, and we thought they were about books. Then it was about selling everything, and then it was about selling other people's stuff. And then it was about auctions, and then that didn't work. Then it was about selling other people's stores. Then it was about selling the platform, right? Then it was about building this huge commoditized internet cloud architecture that they realized they could actually commodify and allow other people access to, right? And suddenly they've invented cloud computing. These are not people who thought they were in the business of books. Barnes & Noble thought they were in the business of books. I don't know what Bezos thinks he's doing, but it clearly seems to be working. So this is, I bring this one up last because I just want to say, like, it is possible. It is possible. We do not have to allow the organizations that we work for to stagnate, or the organizations that we create to stagnate. We can create, like Bezos has, organizations that keep trying, innovating, and doing new things. This number, which is what I'll end with, is 43. It is the average lifespan of the Western corporation, which is insane. These giant monolithic organizations that basically rule our lives have a lifespan that is half ours, right? If you go look at the Fortune 500 list from 40 years ago, you won't recognize 80% of the names on there. So that's ridiculous. And why is that the case? It's the case because every one of those companies spent more and more time looking backwards and more time incenting their employees to look backwards and did not think about how to create an environment or structures that allowed people to look to the future. Besides being really good business, it's also a hell of a lot more fun. So I'd recommend, as you start to build your businesses, I would beg of you, actually, to think about how to do this. Thanks. That's the book, and if you liked it, give me a shout.